There's a phrase that gets bandied about a lot. Jewish values. Jewish values. People say things like, I admire Jewish values, I try to live by Jewish values, but what are they? And where do they come from? Now, the Torah seems to be the most obvious source. The answer would be some. Things like pay laborers on time for the work they complete, caring for widows and orphans and transients, and their rules of warfare, certainly that even by today's standards are progressive. But other principles or values in the Torah are just a tad more problematic, like stoning a person who breaks the Shabbat to death, or bringing a wayward children out to the gates of the city and stoning that child to death, or the principle that the women of a defeated nation can be brought into your household as a wife, or that a defeated town can sometimes deserve to have all of its inhabitants exterminated. So there's a mix in the Torah. There's some ones we like and some ones maybe we wish they weren't even there. The truth is there's no single source for Jewish values, and depending upon your time in history, those values could change, because the truth is slavery in the Torah was completely legal, and Jewish values included the ownership of slaves. Well, in all honesty, up until the Civil War, there were plenty of Jewish slave owners in the South. That's a long time. It's almost 3,000 years. And Jewish values vary by denomination. Few here would embrace what we call traditional Jewish values. Some of them, certainly the role of women in traditional synagogues or status of gay or interfaith families in community life. So there are inconsistencies, there are values that we wouldn't consider to be our own. But what's amazing is not those. What's amazing is how many have actually endured for centuries, that there are consistencies and uniformities among denominations and throughout history. And many of these values that are thousands of years old, actually make sense in our lives, even though they were written for a time that was dramatically different from our own. And recently I found an example that I want to share with you, and it's a 2,000-year-old prayer. But first, a little context to understand how significant it is and how meaningful it is that this 2,000-year-old prayer has found itself into our world and that it has meaning today. 2,000 years ago, the ancient temple in Jerusalem was a heap of rubble. Its wooden beams had been burned to charcoal. Its golden treasures were pillaged, and those columns, those beautiful, ornate limestone columns, had been toppled over into the courtyards. And meanwhile, back in Rome, the Emperor Vespasian celebrated what was essentially a victory over a tiny little rebellious people on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean by building a massive arch. Massive arch. Maybe you've seen it because it still stands in Rome today. It's called the Arch of Titus, and Vespasian's idea was, let's play up this tiny victory by building a massive arch so that my son, Titus, will be bolstered and strengthened, and he'll be able to be emperor when my time is up. So for the Romans, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem was politics. For the Jews, it was unimaginable. The destruction of the temple was the end of their world, almost. Could this religion even survive the destruction? Where would they worship now that God's house was destroyed? How could they survive scattered thousands of miles from their holy city throughout the Roman Empire? In fact, the earthquake caused by the collapse of that temple was so great it was even felt in Babylon, thousands of miles away, by the Jews who were living there. And so a band of Jews with incredible foresight got together and strengthened their efforts to continue the process of creating this religion that we would come to know as Judaism. They were called the rabbis. And were it not for them, we wouldn't be here. In fact, were it not for them, I wouldn't have a career. So I'm grateful to them. But 2,000 years ago, the rabbis deliberated, and someone, perhaps it was a committee, we Jews like to do things by committee, they wrote the paragraph that you found in your Shabbat Shalom bulletin. So insert in there on this white card. There's a reason that it's on cardstock, and I'll tell you about that later, so please don't use it to dispose of your gum. But in this one paragraph, these rabbis, writing in that time, under those conditions, created this paragraph. And here's what's crazy. They said that every Jew should recite this prayer before they wash their face. Of all times, before you wash your face. Now, in the modern world, we don't realize how significant that statement is, because we, for example, do things like take soap for granted. Well, soap hadn't been invented back then. And we look in a mirror, and that mirror presents us with a pretty good likeness of ourselves. In the ancient world, hardly anyone had mirrors. And if you were wealthy enough to afford a polished silver plate, well, then you got a reasonable approximation of what you look like. But most people only got a glimpse of what they looked like occasionally when they looked into a pond or a lake and saw their reflection. Other than that, no one knew what they looked like in the ancient world, or very few. So this blessing, then, if we're used to washing our face in front of a mirror, and that's what we do to get ready to go out in the world, look at ourselves, make sure we're shaved, make sure our hair's combed, make sure that our makeup's on right if that's what we're worried about. This blessing takes the place of a mirror. Because what the rabbi said is, as you're washing your face, say this blessing. Rather than examining every physical blemish or making sure that your hair is just right, the preparation you should really be engaged in is reciting this. So I'm going to read it to you. Blessed is God who has taken away the bonds of sleep from my eyes and drowsiness from my eyelids. May it please you, Adonai, my God, to make study of your Torah a habit for me, and may you make me closely follow your commandments. Do not bring me into the power of sin, transgression, temptation, or humiliation. Subdue my impulse so as to be subservient to you. Take far away from me bad men and bad companions. Make me cleave to the good impulse and to a good companion in our world. Today and every day, in your view and in the view of everyone who sees me, let me have grace, loving kindness, and mercy, and bestow on me loving kindness. Blessed are you who bestows loving kindness on your people, Israel. Each of these sentences in this blessing seems to be so carefully crafted that together they create this vision of Jewish values that I think transcends thousands of years of Jewish history. It starts by saying, study Torah and follow mitzvot. But not just for its own sake. Study Torah is not just about eating less bacon. Studying Torah is about what follows in this particular blessing. Because what follows is a statement like this: do not bring me into the power of sin, transgression, temptation, or humiliation. Now think about this. Every Jew who washes their face in the morning, which is everyone, is supposed to say this blessing. Sinner, saint, criminal, mastermind, rabbi, scholar, politician, government official, everyone has to say this blessing. And what it's doing is by saying no matter who you are, no matter who you think you are, no matter how high you are on the social ladder, you have to say this blessing. And every single one of you, it says, are risking, when you go out in the world, all those temptations. The power of sin, transgression, they're out there. I'm washing my face. I'm scrubbing, and I'm thinking, it's a tough world out there. It could drag me down. It can lead me astray. But the aspiration of this blessing is give me the courage to resist all those overwhelming forces. No one is above temptation. So why is humiliation on that list? Because humiliation is a painful thing. And you might do all kinds of things to avoid humiliation. And what this prayer says, if you're going to avoid sin, temptation, all those things that will drag you down, brace yourself, because humiliation is out there in the world. It could happen. Don't succumb, it says, or have the courage and strength to succumb to where humiliation can drag you. So keep your face clean, it says, when you go out in the world. The word yetzer appears twice in this prayer. Impulse. Yetzer means impulse in Hebrew. The first is subdue my impulse so as to be subservient to you. The vision of God that I see in this prayer is really about a life vision, how I'm going to live my life. God becomes a part of my life if I live it in a certain way. It's who and what I want to be. And it's a vision that I hold before me always so that I'm better able to control my impulses to do wrong. Then it says it uses yetzer a second time. Make me cleave to the yetzer hatov, the good impulse, and to a good companion. Cleave, stick, adhere, follow, after, hold on to. And then it says, take far away from me bad men and bad companions. That's plural. So I need one good companion to help me do right, and I can be tempted by many bad companions. Why? Well, we're herd animals. We follow the crowd. We tend to be influenced by those who are around us. But all we need, this prayer says, is one good role model who remains our gold standard for conduct and behavior. And if we hold that person in mind and admire them, they can pull us away from that yetzer hara, the bad inclination, and bring us closer to the yetzer hagud, the good essential self that I can be. And then it ends. Today and every day, in your view and in the view of everyone who sees me, let me have grace, loving kindness, and mercy, and bestow on me loving kindness. When others look at me, not me looking at my mirror image of myself, but the real me, what they should see, this prayer says, is not wonderfully colored or coiffed hair, not perfectly applied makeup, not the latest clothing styles, but chen v'chesed u'rachamim, grace, loving kindness, and mercy. That's the visage we should present to the world. 2,000 years ago, the founders of our people, sages, scholars, and real visionaries, they rose up from Jerusalem in ashes, and they scrambled to craft an identity that would endure, and they decreed, among so many other things, that we should wash our faces every morning. And when we do, we should put on grace and love and loving kindness and mercy. And then from that place, with a clean face, we head out into the world. As Rabbi Woznicka wrote in the front side of the bulletin, the month of Elul is beginning this weekend. This is the month that precedes the High Holy Days. Yes, this is the month where you have to worry about getting your high holiday tickets and figuring out what you're going to serve on Rosh Hashanah dinner. Yes. But it's also Jewish tradition to use this month to prepare, to get yourself on track, and not to wait until Yom Kippur to beat your chest in anguish. So here's my challenge for you. Take this home. Stick it on your mirror. Don't block your face. Put it off to the side. But before you wash your face, say this prayer. Because this is the voice of our tradition, speaking out of the past, but speaking to us today. These are real Jewish values. And when you walk out of your house with your face clean, show your friends, your coworkers, the random stranger on the street, what it means to live as a Jew and act as a Jew in the world. You know, our mothers didn't know it, but their advice to us was so brilliant. One of the most important things that we can do every morning is to wash our face. So I invite you to join with me every morning and wash your face.